Hi, welcome to Estate Planning Blueprint, where we give tips on estate planning for lawyers, financial advisors, and other people interested in best practices for estate planning. And today, talking about digital assets. So, we're talking about what they are and why they're important. So, I'm going to start off with a question. And the question is this: if your house were on fire, and you can only take one object with you. We'll assume everybody and all your pets, every living item, every living thing is safe, but you can only take one physical item. What would you take? Now, 20 or 30 years ago, a typical answer to that question would be, well, I grabbed a photo album, right? Because that's something that's irreplaceable. It has all these sentimental value photographs and things that have come down for generations. It's the only living picture we have of somebody that's passed away. So that's a typical thing that people would often say that they would take if their house were on fire. Today, I think a more typical answer would be, I grab my cell phone. Right? It's the most important thing I have. It's where I have all of my photos these days. I don't have them in a photo album anymore. It also has all of my contacts. It has emails. It has a lot of things that are digital assets. So digital assets are information, records, data, photographs, videos, a lot of different information that's stored in a digital or an electronic form. And it's easier also to think of maybe a digital presence, right? Because the technical term for digital assets applies to records and things, but that's also different from how it's defined in the law as electronic communications, things like emails. So if you think of your digital presence for the purposes of estate planning, that's a little bit broader, and that's more what we're concerned about is your digital presence. So somebody with, say, an online business would have a very broad digital presence because what they, the valuable things that they would own in that business might be something like their client list. So these days, instead of that being in a file cabinet somewhere on paper, it might exist only in digital form. It might exist on a service like MailChimp, and that's where all of their client emails are kept. Somebody with an online business might have other things of importance in digital form, like YouTube videos. They might have 300 YouTube videos that are out there generating leads on a consistent monthly basis. So somebody like that with an online business might have an incredible online presence that would have a lot of value to it. Digital assets also includes records. So this is important for a lot of people, even if you don't have an online business, because the records are where we find a lot of information these days that we would need to do in estate planning. So keep in mind that with estate planning, it's usually about planning for incapacity or death. So to help you understand that, let me give you an example. This might be a typical situation that I would get in my law office. Would be get a call from somebody, we'll call him Jim. So Jim calls, and let's say his mother's name is Carol. So Jim calls and says that Carol's in the hospital. She's had a stroke. She's incapacitated. She can't make decisions. She can't even communicate at the moment. So Jim has to somehow manage her life. And it used to be years ago that I would ask Jim, well, what does she have in the way of assets that you have to manage? And he would go over to her house and find a stack of bank statements and statements from a broker dealer, something like that, a brokerage account, and find a lot of paper that would show what she has in the way of assets. But now it'd be more typical for all that to exist online, so that Carol doesn't get a bank statement. She gets an email every month that says your bank statement is ready to view online. And she may not even view that very often. She may just go online and look at her online register, check register, and see what's going on with her bank account. So a lot of these records are going to be very important in order to manage things during somebody's life. And finding her emails might be important to finding other assets too, so that we can figure out what exactly somebody owns, so that we can help people manage it. And then, so besides dealing with incapacity, we also deal with what happens when somebody dies. And when somebody dies, we would have to administer the estate, file an inheritance tax return, maybe a federal estate tax return. Again, very dependent upon records. So digital assets, in its definition, its legal definition, specifically includes records, and records are vitally important and help us to know where to find information. Now, in terms of the definition of digital assets, it includes records because those exist in digital form. So it's going to include digital records, but it won't include the underlying asset. So I mentioned a bank account, right? So if Carol has a bank account, the digital record is the statement that you would see online, but it's not the underlying asset. It's not the money that's actually in that account. So this gets a little bit confusing because the amount in the account would be in US currency. And digital assets would also include something like cryptocurrency, which is not typical currency. It only exists online in something called a blockchain. So somebody who owns something like Bitcoin, you don't actually get the coins, right? There's nothing physical. Bitcoin exists only because there's something called a blockchain, that exists digitally, and that is your proof that you have the cryptocurrency. There is also something online called non-fungible tokens. All right, another thing that's associated with blockchain technology that only exists digitally. So non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, and cryptocurrency are examples of things that have value or may have value, depends on the market. But that is a digital asset. So a digital asset, in terms of the definition of it, includes the underlying asset if it itself is digital. So if it's a record, like a bank statement, it's not going to include the underlying asset for something like property, stocks, bonds, all those sort of things. So those are traditional assets that are handled in a more traditional form. So when we're talking about a digital asset, electronic communications like email and your entire digital presence, that's something that we have to deal with in terms of the laws that have grown up around handling things in a digital form. And it does take the law time to catch up with technology, as usual. But there have been a number of laws enacted, and a lot of it has to do with something called the Revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act, which is quite a mouthful. So it's, I will show you this abbreviation here, RUFADA, Revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act. This is available online. You can Google RUFADA and look at the website of the Uniform Commission's, the Uniform Commission's website has information on RUFADA and where it's enacted. So it's been enacted. Some version of this uniform law dealing with digital assets has been enacted in most states. And you can look online and look on the Uniform Commission website and find a map showing all of the states where it's been enacted. And with various tabs, you can find those acts. So there's the Uniform Act that has been recommended by this statewide Commission on State Acts, Uniform Acts, and you can look it up and see what the Uniform Act has in the way of definitions of digital assets and electronic communications, and you can see where that act has been enacted by the states. So the idea is to have states enact a similar law so that this type of issue with digital assets can get treatment that's similar across the United States. So not every state has enacted the same version of it, right? They've enacted it, but might be variations from state to state. So if you're practicing in one state, you want to make sure that you look at the version that's been enacted in your state and see how that works, what the definitions are. But the Act helps us to manage these digital assets and also gives us exact definitions of it. So it is very dependent upon the precise definitions. So for example, I already mentioned that digital asset would include a record, but it would not include the underlying asset unless that asset is also a digital record. So again, a bank statement, digital. Underlying asset and currency, not digital. If the underlying asset of something that you're looking at in terms of a record is itself an asset, like a photograph, a video, cryptocurrency, something like that, then that will also be digital. Now, the law defines digital assets different from electronic communications. And electronic communications are emails, text messages, things of that sort that are sent from one user to another and are not public. And these can be very important in managing somebody's digital presence because it gives you an idea of what other assets there might be. And they might also themselves have significance for that person's life as well. Now, we can talk again about how to manage digital assets and electronic communications in a later video. So today, I just want to really focus on definitions, and I'm going to pause here. Now that I've given you an idea of what the digital assets and digital presence is all about, and see if there are any comments or questions anybody has. And I'll mention that this whole topic of digital assets was suggested by one of our viewers. And she made a comment and suggested that she wanted to hear more about digital assets in estate planning. So that's why we're doing this live stream on the topic. And we've only been doing live streams for a few weeks here, and the presence is growing, but we don't have so many people that we get bombarded with questions. If you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the comment. And there's a little bit of a delay before I see it, but then I'll look and see if we have any questions that people have and want to cover in this session today. So today we're talking about what digital assets are and why they're important. In another video, a later video, we'll talk about how these get managed in the context of estate planning. So I hope you'll tune in for that. Another thing about digital assets that people sometimes have questions about is how we give access to them to people. So it might be something like, well, you know, I have a list of all of my passwords. Can't I just give my passwords to somebody? Well, that gets problematic because that might be a violation of the terms of service of whatever service you're giving somebody access to. And it also may be contrary to a number of state and federal laws that have to do with anti-hacking provisions and this sort of thing. So it's not a good way to manage it. It's really better to manage it through the context of some enactment like the Uniform Law on Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets. So we'll go into how exactly that happens in a later video. All right, so I recommend if you want to do some specific reading on this, you can get a copy of this. I'll hold it up for the camera. Revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act. You can print out a digital copy or download it so you can look at all of these definitions. And it does get quite technical, because they have definitions for all of these terms, like what is a digital asset, and it's defined to include things like records that are kept in digital form. And then you can look up, what does it mean to be held in electronic form? What exactly is a record? There's a definition of that too. So it can get quite technical, but broadly speaking, it's that digital presence where you have records, data, videos, photographs, a lot of things that we used to have in a physical form now exist in a digital form. We used to have photos in an album. Now we have photos on Facebook and Instagram. It used to be we have records in a file cabinet. Now we have them all online. So really, when we're talking about digital assets, those are the kinds of things that we're talking about, but they can be very important for managing someone's life and have sentimental value as well as economic value. All right, I'm not seeing any questions today. I do hope you'll tune in next time when we talk about how to manage digital assets in the estate planning context. And in the meantime, I want to thank everybody for watching. And if you've gotten value out of this, please subscribe, like our video. Helps us to reach out to more people and get more people watching these videos. And so I hope you'll do that, and also ring the bell for notifications so that the next time we do a live stream, you can get notified as well. So thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.